Yeah, maybe as an introduction from our side, my name is Lukas Grunwitz. We have definitely met at Gamescom 2019. We had a small little discussion about indexation in Germany. Maybe you remember it. It was, I think, first day at 4 p.m. I think one of your last sessions.
At 4 p.m.
Yeah, I remember.
Please excuse, but I'm afraid if it was 2015, you said, that's like, sorry.
No problem, it's nothing. And yes, both Cynthia and me are part of Play Central. It's a German magazine reporting both on game side and movie series, is everything on the entertainment branch. And what we're interested now is to hear your personal opinion, your personal experiences about indexing of games, since as you might know for yourself, Dying Light had a very hard stand in the German market. So maybe you can introduce yourself, just a few sentences, who you are, what you're doing at Techland, and we'll just dive in afterwards.
Okay, so my name is Timon Smaktawa. I am the lead game designer of Dying Light 2. I have been working at Techland for 6 years. I joined during the production of Dying Light, where I was a part of the design team. And I was chosen to be the lead game designer for Dying Light the following, the expansion pack for the original game, and the following and the enhanced edition. And after that, when we moved on to the first stages of production or pre-production of Dying Light 2, I was asked to be the lead game designer of the game. Before my Techland life, I was a game journalist. I worked at a CD Action magazine, the biggest magazine in Poland. And I spent there, I'd say, about 13 years, something like that.
So you have already worked on Dying Light 1, so what was your part during the development of that?
I was a part of the design team. I was responsible for, like, I started slow, but I started getting more and more responsibilities and duties. So I worked in a group of designers that were working on the game. It wasn't really that big. It was about 4 or 5 people. So it's a really small design team for a project of the scale of Dying Light 1. In Dying Light 1, I was personally responsible for player progression systems, meaning all of the skills you get, how they apply to the challenges in the environment, in enemies. I was also responsible for crafting, meaning the effects of crafting, the distribution of craft plans, blueprints, and some smaller things like collectibles, like what else? Mini games, things like that.
So you had a quite major part on the development, or especially on the design part. So what was your personal first reaction when you heard, okay, Dying Light won't be published in Germany? Was it a special memory you remember? What was your...
It was disappointment, also because I was involved in the preparation of in the discussions with the USK. So we have actually, what we did, we tried to make the game classified, and we have discussed with the representatives from the board. Like, we wanted to understand what are the requirements and what can we do to fulfill those requirements. So we got a huge list of things that we should change or weren't good, weren't okay about our game. So we tried to solve some of those issues, the most important ones, without really sacrificing the vision for the game and let's say the feel of the game, the atmosphere of the game. We knew that it is very risky that this may not happen.
But can you understand?
But still, we did a lot of work for this to actually happen, and so yes, it was disappointment. It was disappointment that we weren't able to provide Dying Light to German gamers as we wanted it, legally, with the full vision for the game intact.
But can you understand the final decision of the USK? So Dying Light 1 is indeed a very brutal game, a very
Yes,
violent game.
absolutely, I can understand it, because this is like, the rules are, to be honest, the rules are very simple, and I absolutely acknowledge and respect the fact that there can be different regulations in different markets. And actually, as everything that Germans do, the rules are very simple, very direct, and very well described. And it's up to us as developers to make the decision if we want to do something to apply those rules and play with those rules, or maybe we say this is changing the nature of the game. So I absolutely understand it. I like, there's no, like, the disappointment came from the fact that we tried to make the classification, and we introduced some things knowing that they may not be enough. And what we got from USK, from the board, is, yes, this is not enough. So disappointment was there, but on the other side, I absolutely understand that every country, every market, every place, every space can have its own regulations.
But doesn't that make you somehow proud as a developer, saying, for example, there are some violent, brutal games on the market, even on the German market, but some independent institutions say, okay, Dying Light is too violent for the German market, but isn't that something you want to achieve with the game? Making
I don't like, I think being proud about it is not the best way to put it. Like, we wanted to make a game that creates some kind of that has a vision, that creates a specific feeling in players, that they are fighting for their own survival, that they are in the place which is closed, where they left to their own devices, where threats are everywhere, very brutal threats, and they have to face them. And we have managed to I hope we have managed to complete that, to deliver that vision, that fantasy in the first game. But absolutely, it didn't make us proud that like, I don't think we are doing anything special with Dying Light. This is just a game about survival in a post-apocalyptic world. So we delivered that vision, and we understand that vision, that kind of stories, that kind of fantasy is regulated in Germany. So proud, absolutely not. Also, there's no point in making games brutal because we want them to be brutal. The brutality of Dying Light was used for a specific purpose. It was used to create the fantasy I have described a few sentences ago.
Yeah,
so.
I just asked this question because when I remember your presentation at Gamescom this year for Dying Light 2, the strongest reaction or emotion of the audience was often the scene where something violent happens. Okay, you used your sword and cut off the head of your enemy, and there was this whoa effect in the audience, and it seemed like this was something you wanted to achieve. So this is something you specifically want to create in the audience.
In a way, but the idea is not to look for cheap thrills. The idea for us is, we have Dying Light 2 has a world that's very clearly and very precisely defined, and we have spent a lot of time actually working on different ideas. And we came to the idea of modern Dark Ages. We came to the idea of a setting where the civilization as we know it is gone, and we have to go back, we have to resort to medieval technology, to medieval way of thinking, to medieval social interactions. And of course, it all happens in the modern scenography, but how we are in the world, in the setting of Dying Light 2, the people that live in this world, they basically went back to the Dark Ages, to the medieval times that were very primal, very brutal, and as the name says itself, very dark for humanity. And we also wanted to convey that the time presented, the setting presented in Dying Light 2 is a very dark time for humanity, and the players and it's up to the players to decide what to do with that setting, how they want to change this world. Do you want it to stay as it is, or maybe they want to put extra effort in and try to change this world. But we wanted to present a world that's very grim, very primal, very medieval. So with all of that also comes the brutality. But once again, it wasn't just looking for cheap thrills. It was, again, to create some kind of atmosphere, some kind of a setting.
When you're talking, fantasy is a very interesting word you're using. So fantasy for me is something, okay, I have an imagination in my head how something can be in the future or could be. But just in general, do you think that such fantasies influence the readiness of a common player to use violence in real life?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, this is, of course, I am too stupid. My brain is too small to, or maybe I just don't have time to actually create concrete arguments for this question, because this is a question. And a lot of people who have that time and have the methodology and have the knowledge how to measure influence of media and basically media on human behaviors, they have tried to test if there's a connection between brutal games, brutal movies, brutal imagery, and brutal behaviors. And I haven't seen one presentation that stated with 100 sureness that there is a direct connection. Like, there are analysis, there are researchers that say there might be a connection, but there are also a lot of others that say there's absolutely no connection. And there are also others that say if people participate, interact with that kind of media, they actually get less brutal. And yeah, so to be honest, I don't believe there is that connection. Like, there are people on the planet that maybe have some inclination towards brutality, but I think everything can trigger that in them. And it doesn't matter if it's Grand Theft Auto, if it's, I don't know, Dying Light, if it's Witcher, if it's whatever. So I don't believe in the connection, in the direct connection. Absolutely not at all.
But how do you think using such media is lowering the readiness for violence? So is it something, okay, I can live my fantasy in this video game and thus am less likely to use it in real life because I could use it in the video game I've played, I don't know, an hour ago?
That's like, again, I'm not an expert in this.
Yeah, I'm just seeking for your personal opinion.
This is actually quite direct. We can say whatever we want about humanity right now. We can say we wear beautiful clothes, we eat in beautiful restaurants, and we use fork and knife. But the history of the history of humankind, the history of our civilization is unfortunately built on brutal things, on wars, on killing people, on conquering other people. So this, let's say, dark side, this brutal side, is present in human beings in general, and like everything, basically everything we do right now, if you try to trace why we behave the way we do right now, how we attract the other sex, how we choose what to do, how we sleep, how we react to different dangers around us, you can see that you can trace all of those reactions to basically to prehistoric times. So if we react to, I don't know, some kind of a noise in a specific way because our ancestors were doing this thousands of years ago, then I assume also that the brutality aspect of human beings is also still somewhere in our consciousness, in our body. So maybe interacting with that type of content actually allows you to kind of satisfy, to live, to feed that brutal side. But this is just speculation.
Yeah,
I'm not an
completely fine
of this at all.
So maybe going away a little bit of the violence in general. So what we have already talked about is that there is this perception that video games cause this violent behavior when something is happening. But do you think there's a difference between the appraisal of brutal video games and movies in specific? So there are also violent movies, and there's like, okay, there are some USK R-rated movies which are published, and in my personal opinion, sometimes even more brutal than video games could even be. But it seems that they're not as strictly rated as video games. Do you think there's a difference, and if yes, why?
Well, I'm a game designer, so I look at everything through the lenses of mathematics and rules and points you get, and I think it can be more intense, but it doesn't have to be. It all depends on the let's say imagery. So like there can be extremely brutal scenes in a movie, and as a game designer, I would say, okay, so this gives you 10 points of some kind of, let's say, feeding to the brutal side. And there can be some less violent scenes and imagery in video game, and that gives you, let's say, 3 points. But I believe that video games actually are more intense medium than movies. So let's say it gives × 2 multiplier to those brutality points. So it all depends what happens in the movie and what happens in the game. But yes, I do believe that games can evoke stronger emotions in you. And unfortunately, a lot of those emotions in a lot of games is willingness to compete, willingness to kill the NPC characters, the computer characters. I would love to have more games which actually evoke different emotions in you, like, I don't know, love, caring for other people. And thankfully, there are games that do that, a lot of quite interesting games. But I believe if you interact with that type of medium, the feelings you get are stronger because of the very simple thing. You are personally involved in this, and you personally feel you impact what's happening on the screen.
Yeah, but movies in general could have this more psychological side, so they can build up this tension. I sometimes remember playing Heavy Rain, in case you know this game. It wasn't this everlasting discussion saying, okay, is it a video game or is it more a movie side? And several players stated, okay, I felt like I have been in this game because it was so real, but the active interaction wasn't really there because they just clicked buttons and made decisions.
But actually it was there because there was a form of interaction and you impacted what happened on the screen. And I absolutely agree that Heavy Rain is it's the best possible example to illustrate what I had just said. What I had just said. Like if you would watch a movie like Heavy Rain, it would be a nice movie about some other guy. But in the game, even though it was some other guy, because you were actually making those decisions and you were actually doing things physically in your home that made things happen on the screen, you felt more involved. And I felt absolutely the same way about playing Heavy Rain. I almost felt like it's my story because of that. So I think this proves that video games are more intense medium than movies because of the interactivity, because of your ability to actually change what's happening on the screen.
Okay. Just let me think for 10 seconds. Yeah, okay. So let's go over maybe for Dying Light 2 even quite interesting, since you're developing the new installment of the game, and we asked ourselves if there were some ridiculous conditions which the USK wished for Dying Light 1 or even Dying Light 2 to be fulfilled, even since we have referred to this active part. So are there any restrictions which you remember were so ridiculous or so unnecessary, but necessary because the player is actively participating in the game?
Not really, because to be honest, I know this might not be that popular opinion, especially amongst German gamers. But in a way, I think the regulations make sense. Like, I understand what the board is trying to achieve. There's nothing really that extraordinary there. What it says is that you cannot kill for fun. You cannot have fun while killing. And actually, as a human being, it's hard to disagree with that. This makes sense. Like, for example, they say if there's an NPC, like if there's an enemy, AI enemy, NPC enemy that you have to kill. So the game should present the context of the situation that you actually trying to achieve some goal by killing that person,
and has a meaning.
And needs to have a meaning, right? And then if you kill him, you shouldn't be able to play with his dead body. Like, I don't know, hit on his head 10 times to make the hand fall off, or cut his head or whatever. So actually, this makes a lot of sense. Like, this is not something ridiculous. This is not something that's utterly stupid. This actually is a set of rules, a set of laws that are supposed to regulate violence. So it's not just violence for fun. And of course, there are countries that don't do that. And of course, there are countries like Germany or Japan or China that do that. And I believe they have a right to do it. Like, this is like, Germany is a democratic country. The board is there because people voted for some kind of government that decided that this makes sense, this kind of board. So I absolutely understand the disappointment of German gamers, and I absolutely would love to have Dying Light 2 on a MediaMarkt stand in the center of Berlin and every other German city. So I would love to have it, and I understand the disappointment, but I also understand the other side. Like, there is good intention in what the board is trying to do.
But what's the difference between the Polish gaming market and the German one? So is the Polish one not as strict?
But this, I don't feel this is a question about. This is a question that a game designer should be asked. This is basically maybe more of a political question or a social question. So I think the difference is the same as between the German society and Polish society. There are a lot of different, like, we are all Europeans. We all believe generally in the same values, but there are things that differ us. There are things that, like, for example, I don't know, like stupid things, like after work you go somewhere, and if you need a quick you need to eat something quickly, you eat a wurst. If I go out, I don't know what I eat, pierogies, whatever. So there are differences like that, and of course, because of social history and everything in Germany, there's a board like that. So it's just there. Like, it's not like the aliens have landed in our Reichstag and they said, okay, you can live your life as you lived it before. With one exception, we will limit your access to brutal games. It's not like that. It's like, it's
a result.
It is there, like, and you have to live with this. And who knows, maybe like in 50 years we'll understand the guys that tried to limit the access to violent media were right, because finally there will be someone who will be able to prove that there is some kind of connection between interacting with that type of media and human behavior. And then I will feel bad as a game developer, as a game designer, and as a human being that I did something that actually could affect badly a lot of people. So we don't know this. I understand. I believe the intent that of USK of the board is like there's a good intent, there's a goodwill. They believe this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, just sorry.
No, I think the main problem of some German players is that it seems it like to be some kind of random how they stop the selling of such violent games, because the problem is that the games are not really played by the responsible examiners themselves. So they don't play the game. They're just looking at some facts of the game for some hours, yes, but they don't play it. So I think some of them think this is not the
Okay, this I like. So please excuse me. Like I don't live in Germany, so
yes, no
all
problem.
of is about the market and about how the board works. But I must say that when we got our report for Dying Light, it was actually quite factual. It wasn't like we got the impression that people were actually someone, I don't know who exactly, like what's the process behind the closed doors, but we got a report that was referencing scenes from the game, and not only from the start of the game, but from different parts of the game.
Yes.
And combined them and crossed them with the rules with the regulations of that are the law in Germany. So from our side, I cannot say that we didn't feel that someone just decided not stop Dying Light from being published in Germany. Like what we got, the report we got and the communication we got was actually convinced us that there is a set of rules that we would need to apply to be able to release the game in Germany. We tried to apply to those rules, knowing that we are not filling all of them. And we got a report that clearly that convinced us that someone actually checked if we are abiding those rules or not. So I don't know how the process worked generally. Maybe we were lucky, but we were lucky. Like this was a really meaningful, really serious answer that it was hard for us to disagree with, because like it made sense.
So maybe referring now to Dying Light 2, can you spontaneously think of some new features which could cause problems again, or would these be again some?
Two things. We of course have the report from the first game, and we have we understand what are the regulations, and we have introduced a couple of solutions that we hope will make the game pass the regulations. So we lower the amount of blood, we lower the probability of cutting of hands, legs, heads, whatever. Like there's a set of different variables that we just switch on and off, and we can create like a, let's say, slightly less brutal version of the game, but still keeping with what we want to achieve in the terms of setting of creating that fantasy. As I said, Dying Light doesn't aim for cheap thrills. So actually, the situations we create where you kill humans, these are situations that have meaning, that like they're not created so you can kill for fun. So it seems we are prepared to go to USK for assessment of our, let's say, possibility of releasing the game in Germany. I also know the interpretation of some of those rules have softened. At least that's what we hear from the market. That's what we hear from the gamers. I have been also asking this question this year at Gamescom, and a lot of people told us that it should be easier now to release the game in Germany. But still, we don't have that decision yet, so it's still in front of us.
Yes. Cynthia, do you have any questions left?
No, I think everything was said.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And maybe as a last question, do you want to send a message to the German fans as a conclusion?
Absolutely, yes.
So please go ahead. Feel free.
So, guten Tag, all our German fans from Germany and from Play Central. We would like to say hello to you and thank you for supporting us, even if the game is not officially released in Germany. I really do hope that you will be able to buy Dying Light 2 in any store you want in all German cities and villages. So I hope we'll see you next year in spring 2020. Feel luck. Bye bye.